If you're wondering about the reborn grenadier, he is not the grenadier in the human sense of I will take this grenade and I will throw it at my enemies. No, I will take this grenade and I will deliver it by hand.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 69. Nice. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Etch.
Nice. It's one of those numbers. You know the ones.
The sexy number. Will future historians look back on the number 69 like we did with the Mayans and think, why was this so important? And they'll spend so much time just to find out.
We must evacuate the planet. The world ends in the year 3069.
All right, let's do housekeeping. You can listen to us everywhere. We promise. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. And then follow us on any platform you prefer or all the platforms, because that definitely helps. You can send us an email if you want to contact us at podcastcore@gmail.com, and then leave a like, follow, short review, or comment wherever you're listening. We appreciate it, but the easiest way is to tell a friend when they fall, get back up again by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
That's right. For our special episode, our nice episode, we go back to Noxus. We talking about Sion today, baby.
We're talking about Sion. You know, it's funny. Our nice episode is us being nice to Noxus. Listen, we had to do them at some point, and part of the Sion choice is because we love going back in time to the history of the crazed Noxus, because Noxus does have every region has great history, in our opinion. But Noxus is a very interesting one because of future implications due to where they are in current history. But we can't do that without talking about Sion, because this is a great project that happens in that space. Go listen to our Vlad episode. That's going to give you a little bit of view into this experiment that happens with Sion. But let's get started simply with our spell. Salt and Stitches. We chose this one because this is the doctor who started it all. Dr. Esslinger, who started the experiment with the blood magic and this zombification type thing. Mega Zombisu is what we're going to call this episode.
We have to let our weeb colors show at some point. And I'll go ahead and read the card because if you're like me, you probably have never seen this card. So this is a 2-mana focus speed spell, and to play, discard a card and summon a reborn grenadier and give it +2/+0 this round.
Yeah, this card's not good. It's purely for lore purposes. Because there's so much you have to sacrifice on the front end to get an effect that you don't really need based on the pool of cards that came with Sion in this set. But the quote on here is what's important, which says, "Rise again, my child." Dr. Esslinger, the pensive physician. Listen, don't fall for that. That's all PR. This man is not pensive.
No, not in the least bit. All right, he's about as pensive as Sion, and we're gonna get into how pensive he is.
Yeah. Well, and this takes us directly into our follower we have here, which is a card that's created from Salt and Stitches called the Reborn Grenadier. Now, this one's important, and this one's actually a pretty solid card. It's a 1-cost 3/2 ephemeral that to play, discard 1, and then when it's discarded, summon an exact copy of itself. It's heavy early pressure because a lot of cards in this archetype when it came out, when discarded, come into play. So you're looking at a turn 1, hey, here's 3 things to deal with, get fucked.
Yeah, like this card is insane because like a lot of discard synergy-esque decks in every card game the payoff should be higher than the cost because discarding is inherently a 2 for 1. Whereas this card is like, no, whatever the payoff I get for discarding is combined with a body. Like it's
Yep.
this is and that's exactly what every discard player wants. So this card is insane.
Yeah.
But enough about the card. What about the lore implications? Like
Yeah, so
what have we
from the,
got there?
we get a clip of notes here talking about this zombie with gusto. Uh we have an irregular an irregularity in our midst. Though most of those we revive abhor their return to life, this fellow seems to both understand his lot and revels in the subsequent opportunities. Curious. Now, when somebody ends with curious, it's usually like debate lord speak. It's definitely meant. He means it in jest because he's a madman, and that also, reinforces the fact that he's not pensive at all. This man's doing
Yeah,
human research on dead bodies.
yeah, yeah. Once again, not pensive at all, but it's also just great because it's like this is like if you're wondering about the reborn grenadier, he is not the grenadier in the human sense of I will take this grenade and I will throw it at my enemies. No, I will take this grenade and I will deliver it by hand. And these guys are just happy at the chance to do it a second time. It was so much fun the first time.
No return address. So tell us about the Mega Zombisu himself.
Okay. So
Let's get into it.
yeah, Mega Zombisu has got a pretty cool story, and a big part of it is because the Sion is one of the more, at least for me, one of the more memorable reworked champions. So the whenever they do like those big massive overhaul reworks, at least at the beginning, Riot tended to start shaping more of the story that we are taking so much time to delve into. So a lot of these reworked ones have got some really cool stories, and Sion is not an exception to that. So with his story, as we kind of hinted at in the beginning of this episode, we're going back in time. We're not going to go quite as far back as we do with a lot of our other champions. We're only going to go back about a century, maybe two.
Just a
And
small
we're
century.
just a small century. So with we're going back to a point where Noxus is still a very young nation, and we're looking at the Sion as far as his military career. What we do know about Sion is that he belonged to a tribe of renowned warriors that were some of the first, if not one of the first, tribes to become the nation of Noxus. And we discussed this before in a lot of our other Noxus episodes where it was a bunch of warring tribes that ended up forming a coalition that became Noxus.
Yes.
And Sion belonged to a very strong warrior tribe that formed that. And as far as with growing up in this tribe, Sion, part of growing up there is that he takes an oath to never take a backward step in battle and to die gloriously in combat. So Sion has no intentions of leaving a battlefield. All right. If he's leaving a battlefield, it's because there's nothing left to kill. All right. That is, these are Sion's plans. And Sion, at least, a lot of people take oaths and they do whatever with them. Sion takes this very seriously.
Yeah.
So we only get into like the very like next paragraph of the beginning of this story, and I'm gonna read this just verbatim. While not noted for his subtlety or strategic acumen, Sion's methods were ruthlessly effective, and he won many vicious triumphs for Noxus. So, yeah, we if you've heard our Swain episode, we get to talk a lot about some of the greatest minds that Noxus produces within their military and being a expansionist empire. So there's a lot of that. Sion is not one of them. All right. Sion says, "See enemy, kill enemy." Done. They don't figure out how to kill enemy, just kill enemy.
It's Sion has a very Freljordian
Yeah.
mentality, right? He takes an oath that should be meant for posturing and, and applies it literally. And the army's like, well, fuck it. If he wants to do it, sure. The man is a monster.
And I mean, a big part of this is that, Sion, with these vicious victories, he's kind of gets well known to be a no nonsense guy. So sometimes his allies aren't safe if they piss him off,
Yeah.
which, we get to see that a little bit with Renekton, and it gets worse with Renekton after he ascends.
We
If you've
also
listened
get
to the episode.
we also get a bit of that with Darius, even though Darius does have acumen for war. It is said in his story, go listen to that episode, where his troops tend to be very selected because of him at any moment can change the plan, right? He
Yeah.
has a lot more control than most generals.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Darius, because that's how he kind of got into that position, was that he killed a general for his cowardice.
Yep.
And said, "Okay, no, we're doing this a Noxian way."
Yeah.
So yeah, Sion is definitely in that camp, except just, not really with much honor behind it. It's more just like, you made me mad, die. So Sion is very simple-minded
Yeah.
in that sense. And as far as with, Sion leading some of the larger armies, as well as some of other strong generals and the Noxus Empire's growth, the Noxian Empire ends up reaching a point that, as far as in its history, is going to be its largest point.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to look at go through League of Legends, either the wiki page or their homepage, you can look at a map and you'll see that there's a lot of distance between Demacia and Noxus. And a big part of that is more that is where they kind of meet up in the middle. So their borders are very separated. And we're going to get back to why they're separated here, because all that middle space used to be Noxian.
Yeah.
And Sion is one of the biggest reasons for it. He's very well known general at this point. And while he was on a campaign expanding into the Freljord, the Noxian Empire gets surprised by some upstart rebels. And it's even italicized in his story, italicized. These Demacians drove the Noxian war bands eastward. So these upstart rebels from the west, known as Demacia, are pushing back Noxus. And Sion has to call up his invasion into the Freljord. He's going to call it up short because, hey, none of us were expecting this. We were expanding our borders when these rebels sprouted up, but now let's get Sion to come down and squash a rebellion. So he returns into Noxian territory, at least more towards the western side, to a city known as Havardis. All right, and it is at Havardis that we get to the biggest crux of his story, and Havardis is going to come back into his story too.
Mhm.
It's a very important place for Sion. And when he gets there, what he sees is a Noxian army cowering in the city and a large Demacian army celebrating their victory and walking away. All right, because we've talked about this in basically every Demacian episode. Pick one, listen to it. but the Demacians, they built their city in a petricite forest. And they just are happy to be where magic cannot exist, and they just want what is theirs. All right, so all of this was just to tell Noxus to go back to Noxus. All right, leave us. All right, we've won. You're in your city now. You can keep your city. We'll keep ours. And you just stay away. Stay away. So these Demacians are now leaving, okay? And Sion rolls into the city, asks who's in charge. grabs the guy and goes, "Hey, we're not letting any rebels walk away from here. All right, so get your men. We're gonna go kill them." And at this point, there have been many different conflicts, a lot of
Yeah.
battles because the Noxian army got pushed back to this point. And so this guy has been suffered defeat after defeat at the hand of the Demacians, and he's like, "Hey, I've lost a lot of good men here, Sion, and my men, they're tired, they're beaten, the morale is low, and they're leaving. All right, like there's no fight to be had here, so let's just let them go. We'll regroup and then we'll go deal with them." And Sion looks this man dead in the eye and then says, "This is Noxus," and proceeds to kick him off of the wall. All right, like anyone who gets a 300 reference, you're my hero and I love you. Right, but so Noxus or Sion literally throws the commanding general off of the walls of Havardis,
Yeah.
rallies all the troops, heads out the gate, and charges at the Demacians, who are just, happy to be heading out. The Demacians see this charge and they're like, "Okay, it's another fight. Let's do it. We've beaten you all the way out here, so we'll do it again." And the battle begins. And the battle does not last long because Sion's cohort, they rush in after their mad general, who is A, leading the charge, and B, making a beeline for the commanding officer of the Demacian army, who is not just the commanding officer. It is King Jarvan the First. Oh, there's more than one. So yeah, like the Demacians, this is like their whole army basically.
Yeah.
So they like, as far as like now that we know that this is King Jarvan the First, we can assume that this army was a lot bigger than what Sion showed up with and what they chased into.
Yeah, this would be your
Havardis.
first battalion, right? Like your main force that's with the king.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
he probably had some guards with him, king's guards as well. It's just like
He does, and we'll get to them. So these guys are already beaten, battered, and bruised, but Sion leads the charge and is just like, "I see General, I go kill General." So he's just diving past Demacian soldiers, chasing down King Jarvan the First. Sion's cohort is like, "Hell yeah, we know what Sion does," and they go into the fight. And then all of the soldiers of Havardis, or not necessarily of Havardis, but the guys who've been harried all the way back here, they watch the charge and then they go, "Are they fighting? Okay, great. Let's go back inside." And they give up the fight. They give up the fight almost immediately. So already what was an outnumbered army just like basically is like cut in 3/4. Like they're like all of these soldiers are gone. So then Sion's cohort, like credit to these guys, they end up kind of fighting like to the dead to the last man.
Yeah.
And Sion, he doesn't even care about this battle. He has one goal, and that's kill General, which happens to be Jarvan 1. And he ends up getting into the ring of the Royal Guard, breaks through the Royal Guard, and challenges King Jarvan the First to battle. At this point, because again, you're having to break through an entire army and an entire Royal Guard to get to this challenge point. So Sion has some swords stuck in him and some crossbow bolts, and he's still just like, "Fight me." And Jarvan's like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." So they duel, and Jarvan wins. Okay, don't get, he's already wounded and everything, sure, but this guy is like a freak of nature because he shouldn't be alive. And Jarvan finally kills him. So then Jarvan strikes the killing blow, and with his last to dying consciousness, Sion grabs Jarvan by the throat. Well, specifically, what is written here is that he grabs the crown and then chokes him with the crown. Right? So I don't know, like it's not like written in detail, so I don't know if he's like crushed the crown around his throat or if he's just crushing his throat with the crown in hand. I'm not sure about
I think it's like, actually, I think he's It's almost like, you grab somebody with two hands around their throat, but one is grabbing the crown, the other one's grabbing the throat. So it's like he's holding the top of his head and also his throat like this
Okay.
and just
Yeah, yeah.
crushing it. And it's crazy to imagine that because this is a monster, man. Like Sion is a beast, right? Just physically. We know
Yeah.
that from his form that we see in the game.
Yeah, and so, like, he's ridiculous, and so Sion again is basically dead at this point.
Yeah.
And then the royal guard saying that like Jarvan's getting, crushed to death basically. They finally are like, okay, enough of this duel. So then who knows how many dudes are now stabbing Sion
Yeah.
with spears and swords, and he does not fall until Jarvan dies, okay? So he succeeds in choking Jarvan to death while basically dead.
It's definitely an anime moment, right? There's your
yeah.
reveal of why we said Mega Zombisu.
Of course, like for me, I take this as like One Piece. If you've seen like the battle at Impel Down, which spoiler for any One Piece readers out there, it's where Ace dies.
Yeah.
Like Graybeard, like he's or is it Graybeard or Whitebeard? Oh no, it's been too long. Oh no,
You're gonna
I'm
get canceled.
we're gonna get canceled. But like he's standing there, literally like half of his body's gone, and he
Yeah.
dies standing on his feet.
Yeah.
Like it's that. Okay, it's an anime moment. So, all right, so the Noxian army loses, but Demacia loses its king. Okay,
Yeah.
so literally no one walks away a winner at this point.
So obviously go listen to our Demacia episodes because this moment in the Noxus and Demacia conflict is very important, right? It's funny because the Sion aspect from the Demacia side isn't mentioned much, but Noxus remembers this, right? Because this is an important moment for them.
And Demacia remembers, like there's even like some short stories where Jarvan 4, in Jarvan 4's bio, like it's mentioned that Sion appeared, and that's kind of where things go south for Jarvan.
Yeah.
And his escape from the Noxian army is like that monster that killed my great grandfather.
And it's almost like they are constantly making up for it. Right? Like every subsequent Jarvan is trying to make up for this disgrace that happened to Demacia.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how war works, right?
Yeah, but it's definitely like why it's like such a deep-seated rivalry between these two nations, because it was a big loss for both nations. No one came out a winner here.
Yeah.
And so as far as with Sion dying, his body is recovered, and it is specified along with the Demacian king's crown still in his grip. And he's brought back to the Immortal Bastion, which is the capital city and like the capital building of Noxus. And his body is taken back in honor, and they mourn his death and they entomb him. And of course, that's where his story ends, right? Of course not. So now we fast forward close to like 100 years or something like that. And a guy that we have mentioned before in a lot of our Demacian episodes, under the advice of a cabal known only as the Black Rose, a totally, let's bring this word up again. Another pensive guy. Another pensive guy, Borum Darkwill.
That's some bitch.
Borum Darkwill, like he ends up like following the Cabal's advice, letting the Cabal exhume Sion's body, and they bring his body back to life with some forbidden blood magic.
It's very fitting because at this point in time, Borum Darkwill is getting infatuated with the concept of immortality for himself, but also just in general. So for him to seek out this Sion project by way of Dr. Esslinger, right? And the blood magic that we know from Vladimir's episode, go listen to that, that he, at this point, is working in cahoots with the Black Rose in some respects. So Vladimir, wanting to be relevant as much as possible, he always wants to be on the socials. He's like, yeah, fuck it, why not? He's probably involved in the background.
Oh, you know he
Yeah.
is. Like
He's like, here's my notes.
We don't have any proof, but it's official casuals headcanon that Esslinger is like a high up in Vladimir's company.
Yep.
All right. Esslinger's probably met him maybe once.
Yep.
All right. But yeah, so they bring Sion back to life. And of course, this is also at the point, not only like you mentioned with Dark Will, you know, getting obsessed with the idea of immortality, this is also where he's a little more unhinged, because he's actually letting these people perform experiments on a dead body. But it is successful. Sion is brought back to life, but Sion is a little angrier than he was before. So that's a problem, because this is already a guy who, if you pissed him off, he kicked you off of city walls.
Yes.
So angrier than before is not good.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's noted here is that he was constantly struggle against his bindings, against any restraints, screaming at the top of his lungs that he needed war. He needed battle. And Borum Darkwill is like, okay, great. Let's throw him into battle. Let's do it. All right. Let's send him out, release him on the front lines. Let's see how he does. Well, he performs great if your goal is only to kill. He performs terribly if your goal is to avoid friendly fire. So he, like just as he was in life, he hurls himself into battle, kind of like a battering ram, but he's killing friend and foe alike.
Yes.
And not only is he killing friend and foe alike, when the enemy flees, since there's no enemy standing in front of him, he'll gladly kill the people behind him. So Sion keeps killing, even when he's won the fight. And it hits a point where even Borum Darkwill is like, okay, this is not good.
It's funny because that's Borum Darkwill at this point, is he makes these selfish decisions, and then afterwards he's like, not working out. All right, next. It's like, I'm going to send all my armies to every corner of the world to fight at the same time. Wait, that's not smart? All right, bring him back.
Next. And this is like, especially if you listen to our Darius, Draven, and Swain episodes, we mentioned Borum Darkwill's like deteriorating psyche. This is one of the reasons why Swain is kind of looking at the Borum Darkwill going, yeah, this isn't going to work. We need to overthrow this. It's time to stage a coup, because this guy has lost his marbles.
Speaking of Swain.
And speaking of Swain, so Sion gets entombed once again, and
put it back.
Put it back. Return the schlab
or suffer my curse.
So they put Sion back. He kills about 100 more people before he's actually fully restrained in this tomb, by the way. So they have to basically put him in there with a battalion for him to kill. All right. And he's put away again for what is stated as another many years.
Yeah. And
then the tomb is opened once again, except this time it's opened by Swain, who has overthrown Borum Darkwill at this point.
Yes.
Swain, as we have mentioned before, actually has a mind and acuity to battle and strategy. So Swain is like, okay, great. So we have lost the city of Havardis to rebels. We will send Sion to Havardis. Havardis being the city that Sion died at the hands of Jarvan the First. So again, we're returning back to Havardis. But Swain's acuity to battle is, okay, put Sion in this big cage, put it in front of Havardis, basically leave the door on a timer, and get out. Everybody leave. We're not sending an army. We're sending a Sion, all right? We're sending one person, all right? So Sion is released from his shackles in front of the gates of Havardis, and he basically single-handedly levels the city. That is not an exaggeration. He basically single-handedly levels the city. It is written here that he tears down 2 towers by hand.
This is literally releasing the Kraken.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I have an army. We have a Sion. Like, it's ridiculous. So, and I know we haven't gotten to the card yet, but if you've seen Sion's level up animation where it's like the city gates exploding
Yeah,
and this whole city's in ruins and everything, it's literally that, but there's no army. It's just Sion. It's
exactly.
just Sion. But Sion levels the city, killing all of the enemy forces, killing every civilian, leaving no stone unturned. He kills everything. And then Swain basically has like a cleanup crew coming behind him to minimize Noxian casualties as they chain Sion up and put him back in the tomb again. But Swain kind of keeps the tomb unlocked because we're now at a point where it's like, hey, if we have a rebellion or rebels show up, we know who we're going to send now. We're going to send Sion.
Yep.
Sion is now the fixer.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the card reflects this actually really well. I think when he came out, a lot of people were surprised because he is on the higher cost side. But he represents the lore very well, and he was played a lot.
I mean, sure, he's on the higher side, but it totally makes sense because this is like for an aggressive style, like 7 mana is where you would want to be ending the game, and this is a good finisher. Just the last note for his story is now Sion is at a point where he rests in his tomb, but he's always very excited whenever he sees sunlight crack open because now instead of it just angering him, it means he's going to kill again. And that is basically where his story ends.
Yep.
Is just happily waiting for Swain to release the beast again. And now we'll dive straight into the card. So Sion is a 7 mana 1/6. So if it weren't for the fact that it was only 6 HP at 7 mana, like this misleading stat line would give him a dumpy reward. But he's only getting half the stamp. All right, like this dumpy's a lie. Okay, so the reason it's a lie is though he's a 1/6.
It's a Brazilian butt lift. Sion got BBL.
Oh my god, why are you like this? So Sion is a 7 mana 1/6 with Overwhelm. All right. And he has when I am discarded, grant your strongest ally Overwhelm and place a copy of me into your deck. I have +1/+0 for each card you've discarded this game. So a max of +7/+0. So he can become an 8/6. And that's one of the reasons why the stat line is a bit of a lie here, is he kind of stats up similar to Vi, but only by discard. And his level up is you have discarded or summoned 35 plus power. It is for anyone who has played against a discard deck. This is easy. This is not hard. You will achieve this. It's very doable. All right, and that's going to take us over to our level up. And our level up is Sion is an 8/6, so he does not gain any bonus stats. And there's a reason for why he doesn't gain any bonus stats here, is because he still has Overwhelm, but now he has Last Breath. And his last breath is Summon Sion Returned. And he still has the whole, if you discard him, grant your strongest unit Overwhelm. All right, so 8/6 Overwhelm, pretty nasty. But the Sion Return, so when he dies, he summons an 8/4 with Overwhelm and Ephemeral. When I'm summoned, Rally. Yeah, Sion wins games.
He does.
Simple as that. End statement. Roll credits.
It's great, and we have some extensive quotes on here that kind of refer to Sion's existence post his death, and how unlike most other of these zombification projects, Dr. Esslinger talks about how he specifically will have these fleeting memories that kind of come past, but he is the embodiment of the situation in which he died, right? It's like this rolling storm within him that keeps him going that a lot of these other zombification projects don't have, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, as far as like the one quote that I definitely want to read
mhm,
here is though the fog lingers as we first wake Sion, the full spectrum of war stirs a life within him that is both furious and reluctant to end. And like the whole reluctant to end is like just kind of like a little tongue in cheek since we're talking about Sion here,
yeah,
because of course the summoning an ephemeral body is spot on for how he plays in League of Legends. So again, kudos to Riot for translating that game over into the card game. But also just that yeah, Sion is totally happy if there's just war. Sion doesn't want war to end. He doesn't care who wins. He just wants to kill people, baby.
exactly. And this kind of, brings us to the end here. Is that recently we did a Galio episode, right? And we talked about how Galio is this beacon for Demacia, and we know that Galio requires magic to be able to animate, right? And I kind of see Sion as a parallel for Noxus, right? He is the symbol of, their destruction, how they behave as an army, and he needs blood to be powered. It's almost as if every time they release him, the blood that's in the carnage that's caused, because we do know how blood magic works for immortality based on our Vlad episode, that actually fuels him, right? And he is always lusting for it, right? He's always waiting for the next moment that he can do that, just like Galio's always waiting for the next moment that he can defend his allies. It's a
Yeah.
good parallel of these two beacons that represent them. And just like Galio, they lug Sion across to wherever they want him to attack, right?
Yeah,
So I think
except
that's
at
a
least
really cool parallel that Riot, I guarantee, didn't do by accident.
oh, definitely not by accident. I mean, it's like these two constantly warring nations that are just so different. They're monumental characters. One is a shield, the other is a big old hammer. Like they're very different, despite the similarities of having these monumental characters be the flagships of their armies.
The unstoppable force meets the
I will
immovable object.
I will say between the two, I'm a Sion fan, and it is specifically because Sion has legs. And you don't have to have all of the men and everything to move a entire mountain of stone.
Yes, Sion is more practical. And with that, as always, thanks for listening. This has been a long one, but we enjoyed this one a lot. But we will be back soon, as always, with the next episode.
Take care, everybody.